Hi everybody, Dana Litwin here again, and welcome back to Tuesday Tips for Leaders of Volunteers. April this month is Global Volunteering Month, and I want to make a point this week that volunteers are vital to democracy. There's been a lot of really interesting and great research lately, some by Stanford, some by other entities. I'll link to some of the papers below, and also statements from Points of Light CEO, from IAVE CEO on just the importance of volunteerism to maintaining free and civil society. So really, volunteers have always been the backbone of democracy and civil society since those were invented relatively recently in human history. And volunteering not only can support democracy in very direct ways, like grassroots organizing and political campaigns and people working, volunteering at the polls and very direct action like that. But volunteering also brings people together to solve common problems, whether it's in their community or on a larger scale, like the global scale of climate change and income inequality and the very well-funded forces that are working to undermine democracy, not just in North America and the United States, but really around the world. And we know from other research that working side by side with people different than us helps us to see each other's humanity and really builds up empathy and helps kind of open our minds and our hearts to other people that maybe some politicians or some other societal leaders are telling us we're supposed to hate, when that's usually not the case. So some of IAVE's recent points in an article, and I'll link it, is that because of and amidst the global COVID-19 pandemic that's taken millions of lives and disabled millions more, it's also, economies are kind of on the edge of disaster. We're having increasing challenges from climate change and extreme weather disasters. We've also seen, again, this kind of well-funded deep fissure of inequity pervade all of our societies. And there is a very sustained threat from not just climate change, but from people who profit from creating more division and more hate and more rage engagement. And all of those together would be a pretty bad problem for democracy and civil society. But when you add them all up, we're really under a lot of pressure, and it's really going to take all of us, especially in volunteerism, stepping up to help protect democracy and free and fair elections wherever we are around the world. We've also seen in equal measure the rise of volunteers who commit their time and talent and energy to build these cohesive and resilient communities, to create these grassroots movements. Volunteers who push for change and organizing on every issue and raising our awareness and perception of the realities of inequality and injustice and climate change are incredibly important to progress on those issues, both politically and culturally, and just kind of, again, opening up that awareness in society. Volunteers who are the world's advocates and change makers are really making a difference. So no matter what the results of any one election in any country or part of the world, there's always a lot of work ahead to protect the vulnerable and advance the cause of liberty for all, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And just as importantly, there'll always be the continued reliance on volunteers serving as vital actors in participatory democracy for peace, justice, and sustainability to endure. And volunteers from other parts of the world, specifically, there's an article from Germany I'll link to, not only create that added value specifically in their local community, but that forms the heartbeat of democracy, is people coming together to create change, to do good work, to improve the lives in their community, and ultimately adding that up together to do great global work as well. And democracy not only means voting every couple or few years, depending on where you are, but really taking matters of public interest and greater good into one's own hands, and us as leaders of volunteers helping to lead and organize that. Volunteers also plug up pick up the pieces and plug up the holes where governments and societies fail with a social safety net or social services, and more, too much of that is falling onto volunteers to do. So we can use nonprofit advocacy in general, and particularly volunteer and community engagement, to send messages to decision makers, politicians, government entities, to help strengthen freedoms and civil rights and human rights, and not roll back protections for different groups, and really help to, again, bolster democracy and those kind of values for free and fair elections overall. There's been a really, really interesting study, and I just read this paper out of Stanford, and there's a working paper, I'll link to it below, but it's and there's a website called Strengthening Democracy Challenge, but it really talks about, this study conducted a national sample of 32,000 Americans of both, we only have two political parties, of both political parties, and overall, that team found that a set of effective strategies that reduced support for undemocratic practices, candidates, and partisan violence. And so these could be really useful tools in your toolkit, even if your nonprofit or government agency mission isn't specific to voting and supporting democracy. It's just really good to have this information and to figure out how your agency or your faith group can be supportive of this with volunteerism. So partisan animosity was also lowered with this paper and this intervention, with different interventions that they tested, and the researchers found that the strategies they identified often had positive impacts on other outcomes, such as opposition to bipartisan cooperation and biased perceptions of politicized facts or misinformation, like believing misinformation over facts. And this is particularly important because if we do want to maintain democracy here in North America and grow worldwide, a country has to have free and fair elections, and the public provides a critical check against undemocratic policies and candidates. So one of the researchers said this is an important way to stop politicians from engaging in undemocratic practices and mobilize volunteers and voters to oppose them, and help stop that threat and can deter undemocratic or authoritarian or fascist actions in the first place. So I'll link to that paper down below. It's really fascinating. Another report that I'll link to is the 2024 Nonprofit Power Report. Shines a light on the pivotal role that trusted local nonprofits play in building a more inclusive democracy through nonpartisan voter engagement and historically underrepresented or excluded communities throughout the United States. That's where this one study was done. And drawn from that work, with 120 nonprofits across 9 states who engaged over 60,000 voters, the report reveals that voters engaged by nonprofits saw a 10 percentage point boost in voter turnout compared to their counterparts in the same communities who didn't participate in this project. And that effect is further amplified in historically marginalized groups. So again, people where laws have been created over the years to exclude these groups and take away their human rights and civil rights and voting rights. So with young voters, with low-income voters, and people of color experiencing higher turnout gains where this project was conducted. And really, as the nation continues to tune into thousands and thousands of races, and there's tons of information and misinformation online and things happening up and down the ballot. This particular report in the 2024 Nonprofit Power Report underscores that the unmatched ability of America's nonprofits to foster equitable and sustainable voter participation in communities from coast to coast. So I hope you enjoy these Tuesday tips, and I hope that you like and subscribe to these videos, share them with people that you think will also find value in these Tuesday tips and my whole Priceless Advice channel. And I hope you have a great rest of the week. Next week we'll talk about volunteer appreciation and more about Global Volunteering Month. Take care.